sacred nature of kingship.
So, Your Royal Highness, if you put the stole over the king's head.
The ground shifted beneath Westminster Abbey on a day the world thought was ordinary. No trumpet blast, no golden carriage rolling through rain-soaked London streets. No herald proclaiming a new age had arrived. Just stone, silence, and a single crown placed into Catherine's hands by a woman who has never wasted a single gesture in her life. And in that moment, in the space between one heartbeat and the next, everything changed. Britain's future didn't announce itself. It simply walked through the door, stood beneath centuries-old arches, and made the world hold its breath. You've probably already seen the image. You've probably already felt it. That quiet, electric certainty that something irreversible just happened. But what you may not know is everything that led up to that moment. Everything happening simultaneously behind closed palace doors. And everything that is now in motion as a direct result. Because this was not spontaneous. This was not symbolic theater, staged for the cameras. This was the opening move of a new reign, deliberate, calculated, and executed with breathtaking precision. By the end of this video, you are going to understand exactly why the world stopped scrolling, why newsrooms scrambled, why 84% of Britain looked up from their daily lives and said, "Yes, this is right, this is time, stay with us." Because the story of how William and Catherine stepped into the light as king and queen is far bigger and far more carefully constructed than any headline has captured. The Abbey, where history quietly shifted. Westminster Abbey has seen coronations, weddings, and funerals that shaped the entire course of civilization. Its stones have absorbed the prayers of monarchs, the tears of mourners, and the silence that follows proclamations that reorder the world. But what happened inside those walls on this particular day did not come with a proclamation. It came with a blessing. And in monarchy, sometimes a blessing carries more weight than a crown. The Archbishop of Canterbury stood before the gathered assembly and delivered words that cut through tradition like a blade wrapped in velvet. The throne, he reminded everyone present, was not merely inherited by bloodline. It was upheld, actively, continuously, daily, by those prepared to carry its burden. Let that land for a moment. Not inherited, upheld. The distinction is everything. This was not a statement about succession law. This was a statement about readiness, about the invisible architecture of discipline and duty that takes years, sometimes decades, to construct. And standing beneath those vaulted ceilings, William and Catherine did not look like people still waiting for their time. They looked like people whose time had already quietly arrived. The air inside the Abbey was described by multiple witnesses as charged. Not chaotic, not celebratory in the traditional sense, but dense with awareness. Something was being acknowledged. Something that had no formal name yet, but that every person in that room could feel pressing against them like a change in atmospheric pressure before a storm. And then came the moment that the entire world would spend the next 72 hours trying to interpret. Catherine stepped forward, and into her hands came a crown. Commissioned by Gerard and Company, the jeweler connected to the British monarchy since 1735, this was no ordinary piece of metalwork. It was set with diamonds, with sapphires, with Burmese rubies drawn directly from Queen Elizabeth II's personal collection. Each stone a fragment of history, each one carrying the weight of a woman who redefined what it meant to dedicate an entire life to a nation. Palace officials were careful to clarify one detail in the hours that followed. This was not the full state crown, secured at the Tower of London for the most formal occasions of national life. This was a ceremonial version, created precisely for moments that exist between tradition and transition, between what has been and what is becoming. But here is what those clarifications could not dilute. The symbolism was undeniable. The stones came from Elizabeth's collection. The jeweler is one of monarchy's oldest partners, and the woman receiving it stood with a composure so complete, so unperformed, that observers began to understand they were not watching someone receiving an honor. They were watching someone accepting a responsibility. She did not display it triumphantly. There was no flourish, no theatrical upward gaze toward the cameras. Her expression was calm, almost reflective, as though she was already cataloging the weight of what this moment meant and preparing, privately, for everything that would now follow. William stood beside her, steady, deliberate, his jaw set, his gaze forward, not overshadowed and not domineering, but aligned. Completely, unmistakably aligned. Together, they did not perform power, they embodied responsibility. And the difference between those two things is the difference between a monarchy that decorates history and one that makes it. The Abbey bells echoed outside, but inside, the meaning settled more quietly, the way the most significant things always do. And when the doors of Westminster Abbey finally opened, the world was waiting, but not for the reasons it expected. Before we go any further, we need to ask you something directly. When you first saw that image, Catherine with the crown, William beside her, Princess Anne presiding over it all, what did you feel? Was it recognition? Was it relief? Or was it something else? Something harder to name? That sense of watching a page turn in a book you've been reading for decades? Tell us in the comments, because what you felt in that moment matters. And we think you'll find you weren't alone. The photograph that froze the world. There are images in history that don't just document a moment, they define it. They become the shorthand for an entire era. The frame everyone returns to when they want to understand the exact second things changed. This was one of those images. As the doors of Westminster Abbey opened and that heavy, sacred blessing settled over the nation, attention locked onto a single exchange. Catherine bowed her head before Princess Anne. The gesture was small, almost intimate. The kind of moment that in any other context might go unnoticed. But in the language of monarchy, where every movement carries centuries of meaning, it was seismic. Anne, steady and direct as she has been through every chapter of modern royal history, placed the crown into Catherine's hands. There was no hesitation in her posture, no theatrical pause for the cameras. The act was deliberate, controlled, and unambiguous. This was a woman who has spent her entire life understanding what duty looks like, and she was saying, without words, she is ready. I am passing this forward. It goes here. Catherine received it, not with triumph, but with composure. Her eyes held calm resolve, the look of someone who has prepared for a moment for a very long time, and now standing inside it, finds that the preparation was enough. William stood to her left, his gaze fixed forward, measured, protective. He understood that history was tightening around both of them in that second, and his stillness said everything. He was not there to manage the moment. He was there to hold it with her. Within hours, that photograph had circled the globe. CNN described the image in terms that stopped newsrooms mid-broadcast. Commentators who cover royal affairs professionally, people who have spent careers observing, analyzing, and contextualizing the smallest shifts in palace body language, paused, went quiet, and then began reaching for words they do not use lightly. The framing was powerful on every level. Anne, long regarded as the monarchy's living spine of duty, the royal who never falters, never flinches, never performs, was visibly, deliberately, publicly endorsing Catherine. William was standing firm, already projecting an authority that was no longer future tense. Together, they didn't look like heirs awaiting instruction. They looked settled, established, as though the ground beneath them had already shifted and they had simply adjusted their footing. The global response was immediate and divided in the most fascinating way. Analysts debated whether this was choreographed or inevitable, and the truth is, it was both. Supporters praised the calm confidence that radiated from both William and Catherine. Critics searched the image for cracks, for signs of strain or uncertainty. They didn't find them, and the numbers confirmed what the image suggested. A YouGov poll conducted in the days that followed revealed that 84% of Britons believed the transition was sensible and timely. Catherine's personal approval ratings reached their highest point since 2022. The public had accepted the shift, not cautiously, not reluctantly, but almost instinctively, as though they had been quietly ready for this for some time. What unsettled even seasoned royal observers was not the symbolism. It was the finality. The image did not feel like rehearsal. It did not feel provisional or conditional. There was a stillness in Catherine's bow and a certainty in Anne's gesture that suggested something concluded and something new, irreversibly, began. Windsor. When the people confirmed it, the photograph from Westminster Abbey was still circling the globe when something even more powerful unfolded. Not inside a sacred building, but in open air, before thousands of ordinary people who had been standing in the cold for hours. Windsor Castle had drawn a crowd that defied expectation. There was no formal announcement that William and Catherine would appear. No scheduled walkabout on the official calendar. And yet thousands had gathered, as though some collective instinct had pulled them there. Flowers pressed in their hands, children balanced on shoulders, elderly couples leaning against barriers with quiet, patient certainty. Handmade badges appeared throughout the crowd, simple, bold, handwritten, for the future, William and Catherine. Not a slogan, a statement of belief. When the couple finally stepped forward, the atmosphere shifted instantly. Not in the way royal crowds usually shift, not with eruptions of noise and chaos, but with something deeper and more complete. A wave of emotion rolled outward. Relief, pride, and beneath both of those things, something that felt unmistakably like certainty. These were not two people walking as heirs rehearsing a future role. Every observer who was present, journalists, commentators, members of the public who later described the moment on social media and in interviews, said the same thing. They moved as though the responsibility had already settled onto their shoulders. There was no performance in it. There was only presence. Catherine wore a dove-gray coat. The ceremonial crown was gone from her head, but the impression of it lingered in the minds of every person watching. She moved with steady assurance through the crowd, leaning in to receive flowers from children, pausing to read folded notes handed over with trembling excitement. Her smile was warm but measured. Her eyes were fully attentive. She was not managing the crowd. She was meeting it. William mirrored that tone with precision. His gestures were restrained but genuine. He spoke quietly with veterans, took time with volunteers, held eye contact longer than protocol required. He did not rush. He did not perform. He moved as a person moves when they understand that every handshake is being absorbed, not just by cameras, but by history. And then came the exchange that everyone who witnessed it would later describe as the emotional pivot point of the entire day. An elderly veteran stepped forward, medals pinned neatly to his chest, back straight, voice steady. He looked at Catherine and said, "God bless the new queen." The words hung in the air. Catherine's response was immediate and deliberate. "God bless the king." 4 words. But they carried a message that no speech, no formal statement, no carefully drafted palace communication could have delivered with such precision. Unity, not division. A shared role, not a solo ascent. 2 people moving together, in step, in purpose, in full awareness of what this moment represented. Observers described the crowd's response as the moment public perception shifted in real time. Phones rose to capture it, and then, crucially, many people lowered their phones again, choosing to witness it fully, to be inside it rather than behind a screen. That is not a small thing. In an era when every royal moment is immediately filtered through social media, when distance is the default mode of public engagement, the fact that people lowered their phones and simply watched, that tells you something about the quality of what they were seeing. The silence that spoke louder than ceremony. While Windsor's streets pulsed with warmth and the photograph from Westminster Abbey continued to redefine global coverage of the British monarchy, another story was developing, one told entirely in absence rather than presence. Queen Camilla was not at Westminster Abbey. She was not in the crowd at Windsor. She did not appear at any of the key symbolic moments that marked this extraordinary day. Official sources confirmed she had remained at Mill House for what was described, in carefully chosen words, as a period of private reflection. The explanation was brief. And in royal life, brief explanations for significant absences are always worth examining carefully. King Charles III was recuperating under medical supervision at Sandringham. Camilla's withdrawal was framed as a supportive gesture, a stepping back to allow the focus to rest where it needed to rest. On the surface, reasonable. But royal analysts began immediately to probe what sat beneath the surface. The blessing at Westminster Abbey had carried enormous symbolic weight. The Windsor walkabout had solidified public perception. Both moments had marked a visible shift toward William and Catherine. Not a future shift, not a theoretical one, but a present and tangible one. And in both moments, Camilla was absent. Senior observers began asking the question quietly at first, then more openly. Was her absence voluntary, or had events simply moved faster than anyone had fully anticipated? Within palace corridors, the atmosphere reportedly grew tense. What had appeared to the public as seamless continuity felt, internally, closer to acceleration. History, some whispered to one another in careful tones, seemed to be moving without waiting. And absence in royal life, as any student of institutional power understands, is never neutral. In moments of transition, visibility is authority. Where you are matters. Where you are not matters equally. Camilla's absence from two of the most defining public moments of the year created a vacuum, and that vacuum was immediately filled by the confident, composed, undeniable presence of William and Catherine. There was no public disagreement, no dramatic statement, no confrontation of any kind, only absence, and sometimes that is the loudest thing in the room. Catherine's quiet command. There is a particular kind of authority that does not announce itself. It does not require pageantry or proclamation. It accumulates through presence, through the repeated, consistent, deliberate choice to show up and engage with genuine attention, rather than perform duty. Catherine had been building that authority for years. But in the days following the Westminster blessing, it crystallized into something visible and undeniable. One of her first visible public steps came at a luncheon with Commonwealth youth ambassadors. The event was not designed for spectacle. There were no ornate carriages, no ceremonial robes, no elaborate staging intended to signal importance. What there was, and what every person in that room recognized immediately, was a woman fully present in her role. Focused, engaged, offering genuine guidance to young leaders from across the Commonwealth while listening with an attentiveness that many heads of state would struggle to project. Education, innovation, the empowerment of young people. These were not talking points selected by a communications team. They were the consistent priorities of a woman who had been quietly preparing for the expanded scope of this role long before the world was watching closely. But it was the unannounced visit, the one that caught even Palace staff by surprise, that communicated something beyond public engagement strategy. In the hours following the Westminster blessing, Catherine visited a local hospice. No cameras pre-positioned, no media briefing, no official announcement until after the visit had already concluded. She moved among patients and families with a composed empathy that those present later described as extraordinary. Not in its polish, but in its authenticity. She was not managing the moment. She was inside it, offering presence rather than performance. The compassion she displayed was neither performative nor fleeting. It was grounded in a genuine understanding of what responsibility looks and feels like at its most human level, far removed from abbey ceremonies and global photographs. It was the kind of leadership that happens when no one is watching, and it was the kind that leaves the deepest impression. She also worked closely with Princess Anne during this period, co-presiding over the Commonwealth Youth Forum in a partnership that modeled something important. Not a handoff in progress, not a student still learning from a teacher. A collaboration between two women who understood their respective roles and executed them with precision. Anne's decades of experience and Catherine's forward-looking energy producing something greater than either alone. The forum became a symbol, quietly, without making a fuss about being symbolic, of a monarchy actively adapting, not abandoning tradition, anchoring itself in it while extending its reach toward modern relevance. Education, innovation, and social responsibility, not as new additions to the royal brief, but as the living expression of what that brief has always meant at its best. William's measured consolidation. While Catherine's authority expressed itself through presence and compassion, William's was consolidating through governance. He was chairing Privy Council sessions with a steadiness that observers described as not merely competent, but assured, the manner of someone who has spent years understanding these responsibilities and is now exercising them, rather than approaching them cautiously for the first time. Each meeting demonstrated governance in practice. The distinction between rehearsal and reality had disappeared. Analysts noted the emerging model, a dual monarchy in genuine operation. Catherine and William, not as a hierarchical structure with one figure leading and the other supporting, but as partners, complementary in their strengths, aligned in their direction, and together producing something that neither could project individually. Outside the formal halls of government, William's approach was equally deliberate. A walk through the gardens of Sandringham became a carefully observed interaction, with staff, with volunteers, with the people who maintain the infrastructure of royal life away from public attention. He paused. He made eye contact. He expressed genuine gratitude to people who do not typically receive it from the top of institutions. And in one moment, small, almost private, but captured and widely shared, an elderly gardener presented him with a simple bouquet of white lilies. William accepted it with quiet dignity. No theatrical response, no performed emotion. Just a clear, steady acknowledgement that the gesture mattered and the person making it mattered. The exchange was brief, but it captured something essential about the approach he was bringing to this role. Attentive, personal, rooted in the understanding that sovereign authority is not maintained through spectacle, but through the accumulation of genuine, unperformed human moments. He told a group of local scouts something during this period that would be repeated widely in the days that followed. The best service is the kind done when no one's watching. It sounded like guidance for the scouts, but it was also unmistakably a statement of personal philosophy from a man who has been doing exactly that, building, preparing, and committing to a role, for longer than most people have been paying attention. Princess Anne, the architect behind the transition. If you want to understand how this transition happened with such remarkable precision and so little visible disruption, if you want to understand the architecture beneath the public moments, you need to understand Princess Anne's role in all of it. Because while the world's attention was on Catherine and William, Anne was doing what she has always done, the essential, unspectacular, absolutely critical work that makes everything else possible. She made 2 significant visits to King Charles at Sandringham during the key week of this transition. Each visit was private. Each was carefully timed. And during those visits, she reportedly delivered a message to the king that was characteristic of everything Anne represents. Direct, unambiguous, and precise. The crown awaits bravery, not consolation. Not a reassurance, a call to clarity, an insistence that the moment required acknowledgement rather than comfort. And reportedly, it landed. Anne's influence extended beyond direct counsel. In the private receptions and forums that surrounded the public events, she operated as what one insider described as a relay runner, ensuring that experience was passed forward with precision, that responsibility was carried seamlessly, and that the baton of authority changed hands only when readiness was unmistakable. Catherine herself acknowledged the depth of Anne's guidance in behind-the-scenes accounts that emerged in the days following. Whether coordinating the Commonwealth Youth Forum, navigating the delicate optics of the unannounced hospice visit, or managing the symbolic weight of the Abbey appearance, Catherine's measured and effective leadership consistently reflected the counsel she had received. The synergy between mentor and student had produced something rare, a transition executed with continuity of purpose intact. The monarchy was not reacting to circumstances. It was actively crafting its own path forward, and Anne was the person ensuring that each step was purposeful, each gesture calibrated, each visible moment of leadership grounded in the institutional memory of what this role actually demands at its most fundamental level. The king's silent consent. Which brings us to the question that sat beneath everything else throughout this entire extraordinary sequence of events. Where was King Charles, and what did his silence mean? He was at Sandringham, under medical supervision, away from the public milestones. away from the cameras, away from the ceremonial weight of what was unfolding around him. And those closest to him insisted that his absence was not passive. It was not resignation. It was not detachment. It was deliberate. Insiders reported that Charles observed the evolving dynamics with clear awareness and quiet approval, that he understood the necessity of William and Catherine stepping forward, and that in moments of private reflection, he offered words that carried both history and weight. Let her shine. Your mother would have preferred that. Simple, profound, and full of intentionality. His personal visit to the memorial oak honoring the continuity of the monarchy added another layer. A carefully placed bouquet, a quiet acknowledgement of the institution's endurance, and his own place within it, not as a departing figure, but as someone ensuring that what came after him was worthy of what came before. Every detail of that gesture, the timing, the location, the quiet understatement of it, communicated a sophisticated message. He was present, he was engaged, he was approving, and he was allowing, consciously, deliberately, the new center of royal gravity to find its own footing while maintaining his own dignity and influence. This was not a man being overtaken by events. This was a man who understood that the greatest act of leadership is sometimes knowing when to hold your position and when to step back and let momentum carry what you have built forward. The lines between absence and approval, observation and consent, became increasingly blurred, and that ambiguity was not accidental. It was, in its own way, a masterclass in institutional statecraft. The dawn of a new reign. There was no coronation. There was no grand announcement, no heralds, no golden carriages, no moment when the world was formally told, "This is the day everything changed." And yet, it changed. Across Britain and across the globe, the threads of the monarchy were being quietly, methodically, irreversibly rewoven. A blessing became a structural signal. A photograph became an iconic declaration. A crowd at Windsor became a national confirmation. A dual monarchy, complementary, calibrated, modern, without abandoning the weight of tradition, began operating in plain sight. Catherine's visible, compassionate, unperformed leadership. William's measured consolidation of administrative authority. Princess Anne's strategic mentorship. King Charles's deliberate, dignified, tacit approval. Together, these elements produced something that no single coronation ceremony could have manufactured: genuine legitimacy, earned through action rather than inherited through ceremony. The distinction between blessing and coronation had taken on new meaning. Westminster Abbey had seen the transfer of spiritual and structural authority without the traditional pageantry, and the public had responded not with confusion, not with resistance, but with recognition, as though they had been quietly expecting this and were relieved finally to see it arrive. Britain, accustomed to centuries of elaborate ceremonial pomp, adapted more quickly than anyone had dared to predict. The Commonwealth responded. Media across the world absorbed what had happened and searched, with increasing difficulty, for ways to categorize it. Because what had occurred did not fit neatly into the established vocabulary of royal transition. It wasn't an abdication. It wasn't a succession triggered by death. It wasn't a formal transfer of power documented in constitutional law and announced from palace balconies. It was something rarer and, in some ways, more significant. A monarchy actively reshaping itself around the living reality of its present rather than the inherited weight of its past, and doing so with such grace, such restraint, and such evident competence that the world found itself approving before it had even fully processed what it was approving of. The reign of Catherine and William had begun to leave its imprint, not through rebellion, not through spectacle, but through deliberate, quiet, methodical excellence, the kind that builds over years and then, on a single day, becomes impossible to ignore. And Britain, perhaps unknowingly, had just witnessed the opening of a chapter that will define the monarchy for generations. Now, we're turning it over to you, because this conversation is not finished. Was what happened at Westminster Abbey and Windsor the beginning of a new royal era? Or was it a carefully managed moment that still has a longer road ahead before the transition is formally complete? Was King Charles's silence consent or strategy? Was Princess Anne the real architect of everything you watched unfold? And most importantly, are Catherine and William, as a partnership, as a dual monarchy, as two people who have clearly spent years preparing for exactly this, ready to carry the weight of what comes next? Tell us in the comments. Share this video with someone who needs to understand what actually happened on that day. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the moment. Because the story of this monarchy is moving fast, and we are covering every development as it unfolds. Like, share, subscribe, and stay with us, because the next chapter has already begun.